Hi, thanks very much. My name's Alex Shankland from IDS. I was moderately involved in the Mozambique study as the person drafted in to provide that facilitation in Portuguese that Fatima mentioned. And I've also done a bit of work on RED in Brazil and PPCR in Mozambique. I wanted to ask about the potential link between the very important issues that Felix has just raised and the C, the first of the three Cs in the initial presentations by Tom and others. Context, right? It occurs to me that one of the potential limitations of current work on political economy in this setting is transforming context into a static set of givens, right? And Felix has alerted us in several of the other presentations, including Pete's reference to the important role of external actors, to the dynamic nature of that context. So it seems to me that what we also have is an opportunity to join the dots a lot more about levels of analysis. So we've heard some very compelling stories about livelihood impacts and micro-political dynamics on the ground. We've also heard the importance of a dynamic global context. So I guess the challenge is, how do you factor in a consistent and clear analysis of that dynamic regional and global context and how it plays out in those local contexts? For example, we've heard references to the role of China, other rising powers, the Mozambique example, the role of Brazilian investments in driving change in land use patterns in the north of the country, very important. There may be windows of opportunity in a dynamic policy context in Brazil, where Brazil's role in Africa is increasingly contested, to build some coalitions to act on that, with benefits for the local actors whose views we've heard about. So I'd just like to invite people to reflect a bit more on linking that C for context with this more dynamic approach. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Alex. When you speak, would you mind saying your name and where you're from? Did you do that, Alex? I think you did.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. My name is Mike Betz. Andrew Barnett introduced me very kindly as a practitioner. I'm actually an independent practitioner and consultant researcher for about 35 years in Africa. So I just want to say two things, or put them out for discussion. Both related to the last presentation. One is there seemed to be an assumption that a large fossil fuel incumbent would be a user. My experience in terms of lessons learned, particularly over the past decade and a half, is that a fossil fuel incumbent as a supplier, and particularly as a local industry connected to international, by that I mean companies that are involved with oil exploration or production, companies that are involved with coal production, gas production, and so forth. In fact, all three case studies that we heard, Ghana, Mozambique, Kenya, if you want to get attention of the elite, this moves to the next point about institutional capacity building, whatever you may have been discussing about RED or whatever you might have been discussing about participatory local development and resource management, if you bring in the possibility of developing and exploiting oil and gas, coal resources, you divert attention across the board in government, you divert attention in the media and in industry. So how does one cope with that? Because these are absolutely, you cannot get very much attention if you have got Statoil or if you've got Exxon, knocking on the door of the Minister of Energy and the President's office when you want to be talking about RED and you want to be talking about participatory climate change. The second one relates to that, and that's institutional capacity building. Basically, there's a lot of experience that we have over 30 years, 35 years in lesser developed countries or low-income countries, whatever you want to call them, where significant money, resources, funding has been put into institutional building, capacity building, and there's some very, very mixed results. Many of them are not particularly good. Again, when we get into a very dynamic economy where we find resources that, whether they be minerals or whatever, that are driving, let's say, what people get in government, both in terms of promotional and in terms of, let's say, rent, or in terms of whatever. So anyway, those are just sort of two sets of observations I want to throw out. Thank you.
Mm. So we had Julian, and then we've got a hand at the back there, one of our Ghanaian colleagues, I believe, and a hand over here. So we'll start with Julian.
Thanks, Andy. Julian Kwan, NRI, University of Greenwich. A very strong emphasis from Felix on institutional capacity building. Now, moving on from the last question, if you're simply building the capacity of the existing institutions, so in Mozambique, if you take the Forest Directorate, the Ministry of Environmental Coordination, even if you include the Energy and Mineral Resources Ministry, you're building capacity, you're helping them do some things better. But my question is really, what about institutional change? And isn't there room for political economy analysis of institutions and institutional change, how institutions mediate interests in society and set the rules of the game, which affects not only the policy process but the way the economy works. But you also mentioned learning alliances or policy networks, social coalitions. Various people have mentioned these. And so the political economy of this, how does this relate to institutional change? And should we not be investing in some combination of institutional capacity building and change, and in strengthening the, if you like, the progressive alliances or coalitions across civil society, government and private sector to move towards a more low carbon pathway?
I don't know if you want, do you want me to respond to any of these?
Let's carry on with the issues. So I think we had over there at the back, and then we're going to come over here, and then yourself. It was gentleman behind you, and then yourself after.
Well, I think that the question is who is managing what and what is he managing? And when it comes to the political economy, what are we managing? Resources, very scarce resources. You tend to have people who are managing the resources and not the people. And to us, it's a major challenge. Because, for instance, if I am a director of fisheries and I'm managing the fishery, but I'm not managing the people who are going in there to harvest the resources. And so the linkage between the person managing and the people who are actually doing the thing becomes a problem. And if we really want to move forward with managing the resources within the climate change, then the people who are down there, we have a huge gap. In our part of the world, we have a huge gap. For instance, wildlife is doing some replanting of mangroves, educating the people on the need to conserve and probably restore the mangroves. And then you have some director who has a policy that is totally different from what the ordinary person is out there doing. Because there is no correlation, the management of the system itself is a problem. And until we learn to manage the people, one challenge we have is that I am a director of fisheries because probably my background is in fishery scientists. I don't have any knowledge in political science. I don't have any knowledge in psychology. So I don't even understand the people I'm managing. I only understand my basic application of the fisheries that I've studied, not about the people I'm dealing with. So I am not able to link what the people are doing to the resources that I'm supposed to be managing. And until we are able to have a blend of people who have ideas as to what the people they are supposed to be managing, the psychology of the people, we will continue to have this challenge. And I think to carry it forward, we probably would need to have experts who understand the psychology of the people they are dealing with. Then we will be able to carry the process of managing the issues of climate change properly.
To this gentleman over here, and then yourself afterwards. Yeah. And then you.
Yeah, my name is Josephine Angana from Kipra, Kenya. I wanted to respond to the presentation on a few issues. One is in relation to the international context and its influence on the national political economy processes. What I've come to notice from Kenya, in the past few years, there's been a major shift to the foreign policy of looking east. And so there's been a lot of debate on what is the implication of that policy on the national context. And so really it's important to understand the nature and extent of the international context on the national economy. In terms of the institutional aspects, I think it's important to note that to what extent that the current institutions engaged in promoting political economy aspects, and what are the limitations. From my understanding is that this is a new area, and for Kenya, for example, we are doing the climate change policy and bill, while at the same time we have made these huge discoveries of the oil and minerals. So now, how do we marry the two? What institutions do we have in place who can tackle the two aspects? So really trying to understand the interaction of the need to develop and also to address climate change becomes quite important. Perhaps what we need to look at now, therefore, in respect to whether we need to do more research or apply, I think we can't choose one or at the expense of the other. We have to do both. We need to increase our understanding on the political context and how it is changing, while at the same time to try to demonstrate what are the benefits if we were to promote the political economy in the various sectors, specifically oil. So from my understanding, I think the way I look at it, this is continuous. It's not a one-off process. We need to continue engaging continuously, and perhaps by influencing the policies, because now we are doing a lot of new policies, if we can try to entrench some of these concepts in the reforms which are going on in the various sectors, perhaps that's the only way we can be able to promote it in the various programs and projects.
Okay, just I think, Felix, if there's time, we might come back to the end to comment on some of these, but we might not have time. I think it would be good to give the audience a bit more time, since we've had quite a lot of presentations. Just before we go on to the next question, we are overrunning a bit. I think we're going to overrun till 1:15.
Yeah, but we'll have some closing remarks with.
Oh yeah, so we have. Yes, of course. So we'll have 5 minutes more of questions and comments now. Just if anybody needs to leave, just so you're aware of that. So we have the next question was here, and then we have one there.
Thank you. My name is Ivan Birim. I'm an independent consultant. My question actually follows, or rather my comment follows directly from what that gentleman said, because I think his comments go to the heart of the matter, because institutions are made of people, of course. And I think, all the work that has been done on institutional capacity for years, and now we are bringing in political economy. We need to think in terms of, if we are to arrive at the point that we want to arrive at, that ideally we want a person people who combine the two. That's difficult, of course, to achieve. But I think when we think about institutional capacity, we are actually thinking about getting a group of people who combined both the technical and the political skills. I think the comment was made with respect to Mozambique, a socialist legacy, now coming into contact with a more technical market-based approach. What do you get? You actually need people who can straddle the two. So in terms of thinking how we move forward, this is, in practice, this is what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we had one there, and then we had one at the back, and that I'll see if we have time for one more after that.
On the question of what the limits of political economy analysis, I think we've only got to look at the UK energy policy, which I think is probably in greater chaos today than has ever been before, and it illustrates all the points that you've been making today: corruption, regulatory capture, feed-in tariffs arbitrarily set and revised moments later, very strong lobbying, and indeed some of the technical parameters are often poorly understood. And I think one of the lessons that's come across to me recently is that it is no substitute for A, getting the science right, and B, getting the engineering right. And many of the issues like what is it that's causing these fish to be depleted in Ghana, clearly the more you know about that, the more able you are to deal with the political economy of it. Without knowing what the quote truth of the matter is, the more difficult you're going to have, and it's going to be much more of a sort of hand-waving exercise. So a little, I think, a little humility. I think you see the limits of what political economy analysis can do in understanding our own situation. And I remember seeing that the Cabinet Office has a political economy framework that has been used for many years by the Cabinet Office about how you identify winners and losers and what you do about them and things of that sort. I think that's, anyway, so a little humility, but this is obviously the way forward.
Thank you. Okay, there's one at the back.
Andrew Ross from Global Garden, again, is looking at the money. Follow the money. And believe it or not, you've got friends in the city. The launch of climate bonds has been a staggering success. It's now running at 346 billion globally. And recently in the UK alone, it's proven by Unilever's bond, a sustainability bond raising £250 million in 3 hours flat, oversubscribed 3.5 times. Unilever, one of the big corporate investors in Kenya, along with Finlay's looking at tea, coffee, flowers, Marks and Spencer's in their sustainable fish policy. You know, these are corporate actors who've got major assets in play and at risk unless they can prove their sustainability to the city and in particular to the insurance industry, which is very closely monitoring corporate behavior across the spectrum here. So these are the actors in the political economy who really do drive policy in countries such as Kenya and Ethiopia and Brazil and China, because China is more aware than anybody of their own risk in this area. And they too are now a real promoter of the climate bond market. So you've got a monetary influence here, which is very clearly, absolutely hand in hand with the political economy. So go with the flow. Direct your programs into addressing sustainability bonds on the bond market. They're waiting for you. Where are the projects? That's the key. That is the problem. It's finding projects that are fundable at scale and can be replicated, that are scalable. There's the problem. It's not the individual project, it's actually how to aggregate, how to scale up, and how to present it in banking terms that really mean money.
Okay, and then just time for one final question. The gentleman who was in front of Andrew, just to very to your left, yourself. So you had a question? Did you not have one? Oh, you didn't. Okay. No, the one. Which gentleman is it? Good question. There's one here. He wants to ask a question.
I'm Terry Green from the IDL Group, GRM. I think we've alluded to it in some of the discussions, but the question's been asked: how do we take political economy analysis forward into implementation of projects and programs and initiatives? And I think it's very clear that we do need sort of more political economy research, and I'm delighted in terms of the discussion that's been going on here. But all of this, I think, has been an excellent discussion. And it really shows the value that can come in from a political economy approach. I think in terms of more analysis, what I think is sometimes missing from it is more of the numbers, the financial numbers and the economic numbers, because very often those need to be matched with also the understanding of the politics and the stakeholders. And in terms of how one would see the research changing, that's how it's changing. But I think the key thing is in terms of taking things forward. It's a very, very common story. What countries will say and people will reflect and say, we've got good laws, we've got good policies, but they're not being enforced or they're not being implemented. And that basically, I think, is a challenge about how one takes it down to that next stage. And this is where one of the challenges is the long-term implementation. And in the current aid environment, it's very often quite difficult to see how that can be implemented, where you've got, let's say in the case of DFID, business cases which are looking for very specific sets of outputs. And you're really dealing with a process. And this is a national political process that we're working with. And it needs time, and it will be really undertaken by the people in those countries. And one of the challenges, I think, is how do we have mechanisms to work and help with national actors over a sustained period while they work out many of these questions themselves. Thanks.
Brilliant. We have to wrap up there. And for our very final wrap up, I'm going to give the microphone over to Lars Otto Ness, who has been a stalwart in managing all of these case studies and making sure that we get to the point where we've got such exciting and interesting stuff to share with you.
Thank you, Andy. I realize I stand between you and your lunch, so I'll try to be very quick. And it's been a fascinating discussion. I think when we started this project, it was really about it has a twin goal in a sense. One is to apply a political economy framework to 3 case studies, 3 problem areas in 3 countries, as we've seen. The other one is to test, in a sense, a framework, an approach to political economy analysis, and to learn from that and to turn that into something that's more useful for projects and programs by CDCAN and others who wants to apply this themselves. And I think in both these terms, I think we've had a fascinating discussion, and I think we could have gone on for much longer, but I think this calls for an end for now. I just want to make 2 quick points. First of all, I think this is about, to me, this is about navigating and trying to change contested areas, and that's where the political economy framework is a strength into understanding the different players and bringing evidence out. This is, I think, this is about bringing evidence to the table, being solid evidence, and that point was made also in the discussion that we need the numbers, we need the figures to be able to do this. And secondly, doing this as action research, we're trying to expand the scope for climate-compatible development, while also being acutely aware that this expansion or the space for climate-compatible development will inevitably have it will have different effects on different groups of people, like was highlighted in the Ghana case, that you can pursue strategies that will have different effects on different people. And these are not easy questions to answer. And to bring in this time dimension and the dynamic element of climate-compatible development over time, and the political economy analysis as well. So with that, I'd like to thank CDCAN as the funder and ODI is helping to host and hosting this this event. Thanks again for all the people coming here and online for a fascinating discussion, and thank you.
Thanks, Lars. I will just say a couple of words to complete. CDCAN has been very proud and happy to be able to be associated with this. We will learn from this. I've heard the words new narrative, new partnership, bankable projects. I think these are the sorts of things we're doing. So I think this will certainly reflect in our work program in the future. And with that, I'd like to invite you for lunch, I think. And there will be lots of documents still to be taken home. Don't leave too many things hanging there. And there will be information and blogs on the website in the near future. Thank you very much.